The Elder Wand. The Resurrection Stone. The Cloak of Invisibility. Together they make the Deathly Hallows. Together they make one Master of Death. The last will and testament of Albus Percival Wulfric Brian Dumbledore.
Do not pity the dead, Harry. Pity the living. And above all those who live without love.
Hey everyone, welcome to Hogwarts, a podcast. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Hogwarts, a podcast. We are covering Chapter 2 of Deathly Hallows, In Memoriam. And Elizabeth is back with us.
Hello, everyone.
And I know we spent a lot of the last episode discussing how much of a roller coaster ride and exciting and drama-filled book this is.
Are you saying this chapter is not that?
This chapter is not that. It's contained to one space, which is Harry's bedroom at the Dursleys. Uh-huh. And we really just get him reading a lot in this chapter.
Reading and cleaning.
It's really not terribly exciting. However, there is some really solid information here that we can kind of pick at. So we do have a lot to talk about, even though it's a very chill chapter, let's say. Before we get into the chapter, we do have a shout out from Tony, again, who left a comment on Half-Blood Prince Chapter 28, Flight of the Prince. Tony says, "No!"
You have to do that more dramatically than the hat.
No!
Yay!
Tony says, "No! I've been binging this podcast for a few months now, and I caught up."
Oh.
Ugh. How am I supposed to wait for episodes now? Absolutely love this podcast.
Oh, thank you, Tony.
Thank you very much, Tony. I hope you enjoyed parts of my dramatic reading, although I didn't really commit to it fully, but we'll digress. Thank you very much.
That's really cool.
That means a lot that you've stuck with us throughout the podcast. I know we've had some bumpy roads throughout some of our earlier episodes, and some might say some of our middle episodes as well.
We were finding our way.
When we started this podcast, we were literally brand new to this. I was the only one that had ever actually been on a podcast before.
Yeah.
So we were learning. It was a learning process.
And to be fair, we didn't have a really good recording space, and all of our schedules continue to be a frustration of how to work around. So
yeah.
We did the best we could.
We did the best we could, and honestly, like we've said a couple of times now, we never expected this to actually be a thing.
Yeah.
We never expected people to listen. So when we figured out, oh wait, people are actually listening to us, we should probably step up our game. Yeah. But thank you very much, Tony, for that. We really appreciate it, and we hope you continue on through the Deathly Hallows. And keep commenting. Let us know what you think. For everyone else, you could always leave a comment on our Twitter and our Instagram, which you can find at HogwartsAPod. You could also look up our relatively new YouTube, which is also at HogwartsAPod. And then leaving a 5-star review on Spotify, leaving a comment on Spotify, always really helps the podcast. We will shout you out as much as we possibly can.
Yeah, the magic of the algorithm.
Yeah. Algorithms rule the world in podcasting or videos or whatever we're trying to do. So, but thank you all for all of your input and listening and giving us feedback. We really appreciate it. So, let's get into the actual chapter. And we have to start with the first 3 words of this chapter because it's striking. I think it was striking to me when I first read it, and it was striking to me now. The first 3 words of this chapter are, Harry was bleeding. And it's just noteworthy because after the chapter we just got done with, about literally adults planning his murder, it's great. I think it's a great entrance into what Harry is doing at the time, even though it's a complete, curveball.
It's a great entrance, but I think what struck me more was the next sentence, which talks about how the fact he's, swearing under his breath. And I think that stuck out to me because it's just it shows how much growth he's had as a person from little 11-year-old first year to now this almost 17-year-old like
Man.
teenager. Yeah, like it's just such a simple detail, but it's like, oh yeah, he's almost an adult now.
It's changing.
Yeah.
So Harry was bleeding not because of some intense duel with some dark wizard. He's cleaning his bedroom before he leaves the bedroom for the final time. Mm-hmm. He's preparing to leave the Dursleys. And he thinks on this wound that he now has on his hand, and he's like, how have I never learned how to repair wounds?
Okay, that brings me up to my very, very first question that I've never thought about this before. Why don't we have a basic magical health class? You know?
Like a health and physical education class?
Yeah! Like, shouldn't they be learning how to repair wounds or how to, like, do quick basic skills?
So here's my answer to that. And you would think this would fall under Defense Against the Dark Arts. And you would think...
Or charms, maybe.
I mean, sure, it could fall under charms. You could think that one of these teachers would have thought to bring Madame Pomfrey in as like a guest speaker for like a day or a week.
Yeah.
To go over like a little bit of something. However, I will give the out to the Defense Against the Dark Arts teachers. It's been a constant rotation. So none of them have ever really gotten the feet under themselves to think of that.
Which again is why I feel like there should at least be one, if not a full year, like a quick semester class or even a quarter class where it's just like, here's how you stop the bleeding. Here's how you like do some quick stitches or like all the things that you have to do in your profession. Like just something to where if you were injured, you'd be able to save yourself, even if it's just a minor injury.
I mean, I'm sure Madame Pomfrey has her hands full with everything going on at this castle.
So get some other person from like
St. Mungo's?
Yeah, to come do a little, you know.
Yeah, but it would be interesting to have her run like a little side like first aid class.
Yeah.
Of just like, and not like regrowing bones or anything crazy like that, but like
just like basic
a little first
how
aid.
you take care of yourself. Similarly with like, I mean, apparition lessons, right? Like, I mean, that's just one day every week for however long. Do that kind of thing. And then if you're interested in learning about it, which everybody should be, come do it. Because he's right. He's like, I would die if I did not know how to do this, and I don't. I should probably ask Hermione how to do this.
We should also say that magical wounds, wounds caused by a magical entity, are different than regular ones. So he's also acknowledging, like, I can't just put a Band-Aid on this and call this a day.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
But, like, you know, stop your bleeding or, like, how to brew a headache cure or, like, little things like that. They're just basic health.
So he was ultimately cut while he was cleaning out his trunk. And he comes up on some oddball items. And I'm going to name all of these items. And some items he left behind and some items he chooses to take with. So some of the oddball stuff that he comes across. He comes across a Support Cedric Diggory and Potter Stinks badge.
I like that reference to, like, book 4.
It's a really nice reference.
What do you think he feels when he sees that, though, now? You know, because when it first
Cedric. He thinks of Cedric.
Yeah, because I like, when you first saw it, it was like, oh, this is so horrible, and, like, they're mocking me. But now it's just, like, Cedric's memory.
Well, that's what I was going to say is it's a nice nod to Cedric Diggory, I think. I think really the only reason she brings this up is kind of a nod to that whole plot line.
Like where like Voldemort started. Yeah. In a way.
It's a nod to the important plot of this whole book because it's acknowledging Voldemort's return, and this is the last chapter was the Dark Lord ascending. And now you're getting Harry's beginning to this book. And it's a nod to Cedric. It's just a nice nod to a character that was a big part of one book.
It just makes me happy that he has one.
So, well, that's the other question is, why would you have this? It says Potter Stinks. Why would you even have this badge? But anyway. He also has a worn-out sneakoscope. He has the gold locket with the RAB note. And the thing that actually cut him was a 2-inch shard of Sirius's old mirror. Okay,
I'm just going to say, I don't know if this is like a gender thing or like type A, type B or whatever your personality like trait is, but It boggles my mind that this is the first time Harry is actually cleaning his trunk for the first time in 6 years. I would be reorganizing that thing like every summer.
Well, I get you, and I probably would do the same. However, I don't think we realize how large of a trunk this must be. This must
be magically expanded.
Oh, okay. We've had that discussion before, whether it's magically expanded or at least magically lightened, because or both, because this trunk has to be absolutely massive to hold 7 years worth of stuff, plus
of
actual
like textbooks, ingredients, cauldrons, clothing, all the things,
all of the stuff. Well, the cauldron alone, I mean, that can't be a small, light object. So, I mean, just that alone. Let's. But anyway, yeah. So it mentions that he just basically shaves off the top quarter or the top third and just kind of reshuffles that top layer around.
Yeah.
And then everything else just kind of falls to the bottom, which is what those items were. He does mention that he's specifically leaving behind some items. And those items are his school and Quidditch robes, a cauldron, parchment, quills, and most of his textbooks. The one textbook that is mentioned here that he is taking with him is Practical Defensive Magic and its use against the dark arts. So here I am hit by two things. One, it's got to be a sad moment for him to realize that he's got to leave behind his school and Quidditch robes.
Oh, yeah.
I get that he's right. It's probably not essential items, but Hogwarts was his home too. And these school robes gave him a new home. And then the Quidditch robes gave him a whole new sense of identity and purpose and belonging, and a sense that he's really good at something in the magical world.
But also there's the sentiment that he expresses. He's like, I wonder what's going to happen to this, but the Dursleys will just burn it in the middle of the night. I'm like, you are acknowledging that this connection to your home, essentially, is just going to be destroyed, and you have to do it. And that's so sad.
I think he realizes at the end of the book 6 that the future that he has in front of him is not a great one, and it's very bleak, and he comes off as someone who is resigned to a fate, and in a sense, he's almost shutting off a lot of the emotional attachments because he thinks there's a real good chance he's not going to come out of this okay.
Right.
And I think that's what you're seeing here is he's cutting off a lot of that emotional attachment. But
the stuff needed for travel, though.
Well,
it's a whole other pile.
Hold on. He's getting rid of the cauldron.
I knew you were going to say that.
And to your point, we'll get to what he's taking. And I just want to note he's leaving behind the cauldron. Let's get to the items he's taking with. He's taking with Muggle clothes. Makes sense. The invisibility cloak. Julie and I would be very upset if he left that behind.
I'd be such an idiot if he did.
So stupid. So he's taking the invisibility cloak.
Potion-making kit.
He's taking a potion-making kit, which we'll get back to. He's taking certain books. I mentioned the one that was referenced earlier. The photo album that Hagrid got him of his family. Stacks of letters. His wand, obviously. Ultimately, he also places the Marauders map and the locket with the RAB note in a priority spot in his rucksack.
Yeah.
Okay, so the potion-making kit. I'm assuming that comes with
like a mini cauldron?
A mini cauldron of some sort?
I would think so, but I guess I always just assumed potion-making kits were like just the ingredients part, not the actual cauldron part.
Yeah, right?
I guess. I mean, I could see...
It's got to come with something to brew in.
If you have a cauldron... I mean, maybe we're picturing like cauldrons, like big Halloween type cauldrons that you could fit like a body in. But if it's just like a bowl, like maybe like a popcorn chip bowl kind of thing size, I don't feel like that's...
I would assume it would depend on the potion.
Yeah, maybe.
And it would also depend, I suppose, how much of the potion you want to make.
It just doesn't seem like it would be that much of a hindrance to put into your stuff. I was thinking about like the fact that he's leaving behind parchment and quills. I feel like I would need paper and a pen to write stuff down or figure things out. It's not like he has a cell phone to like use the Notes app or anything like that.
Right.
And I know this is probably me thinking too deeply, But I don't know if I'd also want to leave behind my robes, my school robes, because, like, what if I did need to be under the disguise of a Hogwarts student, and, like, not having my robes with me would make it harder to be disguised in that way?
That's maybe thinking a little too much.
That's what I said.
I was with you with the parchment and the quills. Then I lost you
But,
with the
like,
robes.
if I needed to wander around I know it's going to be very difficult for him to wander into wizarding areas, but if he wanders in wearing muggle clothes, he's going to stand out even further. So I would think at least keep one set of robes. It just shows how hard it is to pack for things.
The other thing is, well, I think he's relatively practical in how he's packing for this, but the other thing is he's taking a textbook, or textbooks. He's taking multiple textbooks. Do you think Harry's ever going to actually read on his adventures? It's Harry Potter. When has he ever shown any actual...
Yeah, but it's one of those things where it's like, you don't have a teacher with you to just go to and be like, okay, what is this dark creature? Or what plant is this? Or what should I do? So books would be the only... There's no Google. Like, books would be the only place you could go to get information. And plus, we know Hermione's going to come with him, so at least she'll be reading.
Well, he mentions that before, too, about, like, the wound care. It's like, I got to remember to ask Hermione how to do all of this.
Right.
Which, yes, that would be prudent. Also, we get a note that this is probably, like, the first Hedwig mention in a real long time. Hedwig is present, but irritated. So
I feel like that's me at work some days.
It's everybody at work some days. She's upset because she's not being let out regularly to hunt or just spread her wings in general. So she's a little irritated. But Harry spends a lot of his time sorting through some of the daily prophets and does this come across a headline noting the resignation of one Charity Burbage.
Yeah. Retirement in quotation marks, because we know what actually happened to her.
Oh, we do. We are aware of what happened to Charity Burbage. So he does mention as he's sorting through the daily prophets that he's a little annoyed because they don't really mention much about Voldemort. And he's assuming the Ministry of Magic is leaning on the prophet a little bit to kind of suppress some of that information.
I mean, history shows that they do that.
That is true. But in the past, it's been Fudge trying to... So we've talked about, like, Fudge and his motives because he's also trying not to send people into a crazy panic with information like, hey, Voldy's back. The greatest threat to your livelihood is back, and blah, 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 blah. You know, all that kind of stuff. We all agreed it might not have been the best strategy from Fudge. Fair. But I think Rufus is doing the same thing here. Mm-hmm. He's trying not to be like, hey, another Hogwarts professor might be in a lot of trouble. Like, I think he's...
Dead? Question mark?
Well, I think he's trying to, like... It would be really depressing if in the paper every day, disappearance, death, disappearance, death. You know, it's like...
Which I guess then is debatable of what do you do? Do you give the public the truth so they know exactly how bad things are and what to expect every time they leave their house, or even sometimes when they are in their house? Or do you sugarcoat it like this to keep people living because, you know, if the country is just in despair when already there's
everything's going to shut down.
Yeah, and I mean, like, there's already Dementors out there. We know that there's dark wizards. We know that there's a lot of despair, and that mood just feeds upon itself like a horrific monster. So having that is difficult. You need hope.
It can't be all doom and gloom all the time.
Yeah.
He's got to put some positive spin to keep this thing going, unless he just does shut it down. Mm-hmm. And then everybody's in, like, a martial law, stay in your houses, don't leave kind of thing. And only let people in that you are 100% sure.
That said, they might not even really know, like, if Charity Burbage is alive or dead or not.
Maybe Charity is not a dumb individual. Mm-hmm. Maybe she saw where this tide was turning and was like, you know what? I'm going to get out of here. I'm resigning. Like, maybe she actually did put in her resignation and was like, I'm getting out of here. But obviously,
yeah,
did not work out.
Yeah. Very short retirement.
So, I mean, maybe it is legit. Maybe she did actually resign and then stuff happened. Mm-hmm. It's plausible, I suppose. Doesn't have to be a complete cover-up. But also, from their point of view, if another person at Hogwarts gets plucked, that's not a good look.
No.
That's a real bad look.
No, it's not.
So, I mean, it could be either one. Anyway, we get further on into Harry's perusing of Daily Prophets, and he finds the one that he was really looking for. It's Albus Dumbledore Remembered by Alpheus Dodge. We're going to call him Dodge. D-O-G-E.
Yeah, I know there's no D, but I always read it as Dodge.
Yeah. Doge?
Doge probably is better, but like...
Whatever. I always read it as Dodge, so that's what we're going to call him.
He's met him before.
He has a couple of different times. Mm-hmm. If I'm not mistaken, he was in the Leaky Cauldron when Harry first went into Diagon Alley.
Was he the one? He was the one who kept bowing to him.
Yeah, he was the one with the weird hat. I think. Yeah.
And then he also came to the Dursleys' house to pick up Harry.
Right. So we've seen him a couple of different times. Obviously, from the tone of this article, he knew Albus quite well. Alpheus says he did go to school. He attended Hogwarts with Albus when they were 11. Alpheus was recovering from a bout with dragonpox.
I do like the detail he said that, like, even though he was recovering from it, his face was still all pockmarked, but even more so the fact that he was green.
A greenish hue.
It makes me think of, like, Wicked a little bit.
It makes me think of the "you're sick" emoji.
Yeah.
That's a little, like, greenish.
Yeah.
But anyway, Albus had his own issues. Albus's father had recently attacked 3 muggles.
Young muggles.
And was sent to Azkaban, where he ultimately died. Mm-hmm. So he did not leave Azkaban after this. So Albus was carrying the weight of that infamous moment and had to deal with some questions about that. And also, as would happen, I imagine some pure-blood individuals at the school, Slytherins, were probably interested to be like, oh, Albus, you're definitely anti-Muggle, right?
Yeah,
like,
if your
you're
father
definitely
Percival was,
like,
then
oh,
clearly
okay.
you are.
So he had to deal with a lot of anti-Muggle questions, and Albus supposedly, reportedly, at this point in his life, did not harbor any anti-Muggle vibes.
Mm-hmm. Although he never, like, denied the fact that his father was guilty. Like, he's like, yeah, Percival definitely did attack these 3 guys.
That's usually as far as he would go with it. Mm-hmm. He would admit that, and then
shut the conversation down.
Yeah. So, Alpheus goes on to say, Albus was the most brilliant student ever at Hogwarts. But he doesn't stop there. He qualifies it with, at the end of year 1.
Yeah.
By the end of his first year, people were thinking he might be the most brilliant student that ever attended the school. Just for reference, Merlin attended this school. Like, the curse word, Merlin's beard, like stuff like that. Merlin's cloak, stuff like that. He attended. He was a Slytherin, I believe. So, Albus is...
He's making a name for himself.
He's making a name for himself early.
And enough to gain attention from famous people. He mentioned Nicholas Flamel, who we've obviously talked about before, and Matilda Bagshot, whose name they recognize from their, like, history textbooks. And then this Adalbert Waffling, is that how you would say it?
Adalbert Waffling.
Okay, yours is better than my pronunciation.
Who was a magical theoretician.
Which, in itself, just sounds fascinating to me. Because, like, you're looking into the theories of how magic was formed and how people become magical. Like, not just wizards and witches, but, like, Muggle-borns, too. But in all 3 of those cases, it sounds like Dumbledore is really interested in the history of magic. We know, like, Nicholas Flamel has obviously seen centuries worth of history. Matilda Bagshot obviously studied history. This Waffling guy would have been theorizing about how, like, magic historically started and probably digging deep into historical timelines to be like, okay, where did it actually first seem to pop up, So it's kind of fascinating to me that Dumbledore has as much information about history as maybe, like, Professor Binns does, if not more, that interest in it. But he's also good at transfiguration and charms and potions because he's publishing articles in magazines
all those
about
publications.
those. Like, what kind of student is this? Just like,
his
like
papers,
you said, the best by far.
Well, I mean, it is kind of, you'll get notes from students usually in college, not when he's, I assume these papers came
later,
not necessarily in his first year, but
impressive in its own right, though. Like,
well,
if you're getting published by, like, professionals.
Well, yeah, he would still be in his high school years, and most times I think about students being published, it's usually in college.
Yeah, or grad school.
Well, yeah, Rich would be post-18, here, at least. And he would be doing this between 11 and 17, which is remarkable. Which sets him on a track most think he would end up as the Minister of Magic. However, Alpheus says that he really had never an interest in anything ministry related.
No, he said he just has that preference for teaching. Which I do want to also make a side comment. Knowing that Dumbledore was this good in this many amount of subjects, I feel like he could have been a much better resource for Hermione as like a mentor.
Or Bill, or Percy,
yeah,
or Barty Crouch Jr.,
and I'm
or
sure,
any
but
number
like,
of talented students.
Like, we know firsthand more so Hermione's intelligence level. Like, we saw Percy being a dedicated student, but we don't know if it's natural intelligence or just, like, he's so dedicated. But I feel like Hermione has the dedication as well as the natural intelligence, which Dumbledore, it seems like, also had. So I feel like he could have, like as a teacher, we get told to differentiate our teaching. So you have like the students who are in that kind of mid-range, but then you have students who maybe have like special needs or IEPs and they're at the lower range. And you have the kids who need the extra challenge because they get bored with just like what everyone else is doing. I feel like this is one of those cases where Dumbledore could have come in and given Hermione more of a challenge. So she's getting more out of her education than she already was.
So I think we get caught up with Hermione because she's the best witch of her year in the years that we are reading about Hogwarts. As I've just mentioned, Albus is quite old. He's been around for a long time.
Yeah.
There have been very talented witches and wizards. I just mentioned a few of them with Bill Percy and Barty Crouch Jr. Well, Amelia Bones is very talented. I'm sure Rufus was not a scrub coming through Hogwarts. I mean, Tonks was a very bright student. I'm sure Mad-Eye Moody was like, there are so many brilliant witches and wizards that come through there. My comeback, I guess, to that would be all of those people are incredibly talented and brilliant. Albus was a full tier up. What Alpheus kind of points to is he was always good at helping out his other students. He would always help out Alpheus if he had a question, or any other student that had or wanted or needed some help or some guidance or whatever. There was a little note of competition, I guess, or comparisons being drawn once Albus's younger brother joined the fray.
3 years younger.
3 years after Albus and Alpheus attended Hogwarts, Aberforth comes into the picture. Aberforth, not exactly like Albus.
Well, I mean, he flat out says, like, it couldn't have been easy for him to live in Albus's shadow. Albus had so many awards, so many accolades, so many famous friends, everyone singing his praises. To come in and be able to make a name for yourself in comparison to him, like, there's no way. So he said he preferred dueling to reasoned discussion and, like, education, I guess, like schoolwork. So he seems more of a, like,
more action than...
Yeah, give me my hands dirty as opposed to sit behind a textbook.
Yeah. So they get through their Hogwarts years. And after Hogwarts, the tradition, apparently, is to take a tour of the world.
I put a comment, this would be right up your alley.
Yeah, twist my arm on this tradition. I would love this. However, on the eve of the trip, Albus has to back out because his mother, Kendra, dies. So Alpheus travels alone around the world, and he feels a little bad about it because he wrote to Albus in a somewhat, looking back on it, insensitive tone.
Because he was like, look at these cool things I did in Egypt. Look at these cool things I did in Africa. Like,
he was encountering chimeras in Greece and learning with alchemists in Egypt. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I would be a little jealous. I'd be like, are you kidding me? I am more equipped and better than you to deal with all of these things. And I'm stuck at home.
Yeah, because, I mean, he has to be the head of his household. You know, his dad has died. His mother has died. He's got his little sister, Ariana, and he's got Aberforth to care for, too. So it's a big responsibility.
He would still be in school. He would be, still in school at this point. So, but at the end of the year's travels, Alpheus returns home, but Albus encounters another family tragedy. Mm-hmm. His younger sister, Ariana, dies. And so he's lost his mother, his father, and his sister now. Mm-hmm. And he's only about 18.
Yeah.
At this point.
And then, too, it's almost like the loss of his relationship with Aberforth. Because, I mean, Dodge had said previously they had gotten along as well as, like, brothers could. But this death of their younger sister seems to be a divide that takes many, many, many years for them to kind of work through and be tolerant of each other, if not like the way they once were. He said Albus feels incredibly guilty about Ariana's death, but Dodge is like, obviously there was no need for him to be feeling like that.
You get the vibe that Alpheus is trying to paint a very positive picture of Albus.
Which I feel like people generally do in people's deaths and obituaries.
So, he does note that in time they cultivated a cordial relationship even after the death of Ariana. But Alpheus is like, other biographies will tell the tales of all of Albus's accomplishments, but here's quite a few. Mm-hmm. And then he lists off the 12 uses of Dragon's Blood, judgments as a chief warlock of the Wizengamot, and obviously defeating Grindelwald in an epic duel in 1945.
I wonder if they cover that in Ben's class. Because I feel like Ben's class, part of the struggle is that there's centuries and centuries and centuries worth of magical history to cover.
They have 7 years.
So you would think you would get to this point, at which case it probably would have been really cool to be like, hey, Dumbledore, to come to the class and talk about it. Although I don't know if he would have taken up that.
Wait, are we talking about... We don't know for sure. I think we are assuming Harry continues to take History of Magic in year 6.
I mean, does he pay attention, though?
Well, why would you drop Care of Magical Creatures and not drop Binz's class?
Unless you're not allowed to drop it.
Well, is it considered a core subject?
I don't know.
I don't know how they choose their subjects or why.
I just think it'd be really fun if they did cover it, to be like, look, one of the people in this world famous duel, which they compared as just as important as like the rise of Voldemort and the secrecy, the Statue of Secrecy being passed. To have Dumbledore come and be like, this is a living legend.
Here's the problem with Binz, is he's probably, what I'm assuming, is a very linear teacher. Mm-hmm. He goes from wherever he wants to start the class, however long ago he wants to start that class, and just slowly trudges his way through history.
Yeah.
And what I think would be interesting is like if he broke it up into like
a century per year.
If one semester was just like, not even that, because that's still segmented, but if he broke it up with like one semester being greatest duels in wizarding history, and then you just go through some of the biggest duels throughout history and you just cover those, and that's like a semester or like, section or whatever you want to call it. Or like
troll relations, goblin relations, like that kind of stuff.
Yeah, you could have a year, like the second year could be all relations with magical creatures. So you could have a centaur issue, you could have a goblin related issue, you can have house elf issues.
Or they're like with muggles and how that's been passed.
Gnome freedoms. I don't know, whatever you want to do.
But the lack thereof.
The lack thereof. Anyway, after reading all of this from Alpheus, Harry ponders just how little he actually knew about Albus. and immediately tucks the obituary into one of his books, the Defense Against the Dark Arts book that I mentioned earlier. There is one other article that Harry comes across in his perusings of the Daily Prophets. Dumbledore, the Truth at Last. And in Dumbledore, the Truth at Last, we learn that Rita Skeeter will be writing an article writing a book.
She's written the book, 900 pages worth.
About Albus, called The Life and Lies of Albus Dumbledore. Yes, it is a 900-page book done 4 weeks after Albus's death, which was in June.
And the description of it seems like she's painting Albus as having this incredibly disturbed childhood. He was this lawless youth with lifelong feuds and tons of guilty secrets.
Yes, it seems like the polar opposite of the obituary that Alpheus just wrote.
Right.
She does tease that she does have a airtight, big-time source for a lot of her information.
But she also has some questions that I'm a little, like the one that stuck out to me the most was she was like, what was the real purpose of the secret organization known as the Order of the Phoenix? And I'm like, considering how hush-hush they try to make the kids be about the Order, like you can't even say the full name or anything like that, feels like it's pretty available for the public to know about this secret organization.
Well, the organization is known because they fought in the First Wizarding War. So, I mean, it's a known entity.
But also, like, the real purpose of it, what do you think the purpose was? They tried to take down Voldemort. The end. Like,
well, okay, but you're not writing from a biased point of view. She's writing from a biased point of view. So she's trying to sell her book.
Oh, yeah.
So, which she does, say what you want about Rita. She is a salesman because she sells her book phenomenally well. She teases just enough to get you interested. She gives you just enough information to be like, ooh, actually, that's a good point. Oh, wait, now I have to actually read chapters 12 to 13 or 12 to 15 or whatever.
And she does two other good things, I think, to add to that salesman pitch. Like, she said how she got her info by, bribing people, being like, here, you have more gold if you tell me some stuff, or refusing to say no, using the quick quotes quill, and like you said, having that secret source. But also the fact that they include in that article the criticism of her book from Dodge. And she's like, yeah, but is he really mentally, like, all there? Because last time I talked to him, he seemed a little loony. So don't believe that article. Come read my book instead.
We can go back to the ageism at play here, because Alpheus would be about 100-ish years old, give or take. So that's a little ageism from Rita, but Harry obviously not very happy while reading that bit.
Well, for two things. He said how Albus was like dabbling in the dark arts in his youth and he wasn't as like tolerant of people. And he's like, I'm sorry, that's not the Dumbledore I know. But then also she's talking about how like, oh, she's so close with Harry still. She's got a whole chapter devoted to him. We're besties. I'm probably the only one alive who really knows Harry Potter. It's like, excuse me.
She's obviously feeling very bold, considering Hermione is still holding something over her head.
Yeah.
So
she probably figures there's too much else going on to really focus on her.
She does this without obviously telling anybody. So does Hermione send her an owl after seeing this article and be like, excuse you? What are you doing? But anyway, while he's angry, he does pick up that 2-inch shard of Sirius's mirror. And while holding it, he does get the quickest flash of brightest blue coming across. And he wonders, wait, did I just imagine that because I was thinking about Dumbledore? Or was that actually the man himself, Albus Dumbledore?
Yeah. I like how he even looked around the room and was like, do I have anything blue in my room? He's like, no, my walls are this nasty peach color that Aunt Petunia picked out.
But that's how the chapter ends.
Yeah, if anything was certain, it was that the bright blue eyes of Albus Dumbledore would never pierce him again.
Yeah. So that's how chapter 2 ends. And like I said, it's not necessarily the most quote-unquote thrilling of chapters. However, there is quite a bit to dissect because you get a lot of background on Albus Dumbledore, whether true or false or however which way you want to frame it.
Yeah, I feel like the hearing about like his family members and picturing him as a younger man, like Harry said, like I kind of pictured Dumbledore just coming out of the wound with like a super long beard and a broken nose and glasses. Like hearing all this backstory,
he's a man that has also suffered a lot of tragedy through his teenage years, similar to Harry.
And Harry noted, like, we've never actually talked about that. The only time he said he ever asked him a personal question was with the Mirror of Earsaid, and it was like he lied in his response.
It might be the only time he's ever lied to Harry directly.
Yeah.
And also, every time they've met, it's been Harry.
Yeah.
Harry,
Let's talk
Harry,
about your life,
Harry,
your problems.
Harry.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's just an interesting thing to kind of dwell on. Mm-hmm. But anyway.
Want to dwell on it in the spoilers?
We have much more to discuss on Albus and all other kinds of things in the spoiler section. So we will take a break, enjoy the new break sound, and we will be right back. Before we get to our break sound, I'd like to acknowledge our friend Andy, who helps us produce our intros and our break sounds. If you want to hear more of Andy's work and like Formula One racing, check out the Outlap F1 podcast. It's your one-stop shop for Formula One news, insights, race previews, and reviews. You can find them wherever you listen to podcasts, and they even have a YouTube page. So check out Andy, Cody, John, James, and Deanna, and join them on the Outlap.
Oh, such a clutch off-season pickup, Dave.
I was worried we'd bring back the same team.
I meant those blackout motorized shades.
Blinds.com made it crazy affordable to replace our old blinds.
Hard to install?
No, it's easy. I installed these and then got some for my mom. She talked to a design consultant for free and scheduled a professional measure and install.
Hall of Fame son.
They're the #1 online retailer of custom window coverings in the world.
Blinds.com is the GOAT.
Shop Blinds.com's primetime kickoff event. Save up to 50% off select styles, plus doorbusters. Rules and restrictions may apply.
Dobby has no master. Dobby is a free elf.
All right, so we are back with the spoiler section of Chapter 2 of Deathly Hallows in Memorium. And I wanted to start off with just acknowledging a couple of things from the non-spoiler. The significance of the three names you brought up as having a tie to, one, magical history, and two, what you can potentially do with magic. And they both tie in to what Albus was knocking on the door of, which is the title of this book.
Yeah.
The Deathly Hallows.
Yeah.
He wants to know everything he can about magical history to trace back where those all came from and where they all went. Mm-hmm. And, okay, what is the magic here? What can they do? Is it even possible? Like, he wants to really delve in. It's similar to Voldy and Horcruxes, really.
Right.
And how he wants to delve into this relatively unknown branch of magic that's very theoretical. Mm-hmm. And what can he do with it?
And potentially dark, too. So, in technicality, like, Rita Skeeter isn't completely wrong with her comments about Dumbledore's past and his thoughts about muggles and magic and the dark arts.
So what Albus Dumbledore is not the rosy picture that Alpheus paints, and it's not the doom and gloom that Rita. Shockingly,
he's a complicated man.
People are complicated, and they have good and bad sides. Mm-hmm. Literally everyone. Mm-hmm. To also your comment about him as a teacher and how he could have mentored some of Hogwarts' more brilliant students better, I think it changes in him when he finally realizes just how far above most people he actually is. Mm-hmm. You know, I think it's a novelty. I think it's like, oh, okay, I'll help you out with your Transfiguration homework because really I don't have to think about it. I'll just whatever. Mm-hmm. But then he meets Grindelwald. Mm-hmm. And I think then it changes because now he's met someone who's on his same level. Right. And now he's like, oh, I have someone I can, like, really talk to. I have someone that I can, like, actually share theoretical thought.
Plus, I feel like Grindelwald had that edge to him that maybe Hermione wouldn't have. Like, Grindelwald was very much about pushing the boundaries of magic, similar to how Voldemort is, and like, what you can do with the Deathly Hallows and stuff.
I just think sometimes when you're so brilliant or when you're so, like, I'll break it down in an athletic sense because that's where my realm of expertise is. But if you have someone who's like the greatest basketball player of all time, mm-hmm. it's hard for him to teach others how to do things mm-hmm. because you can't do it like me. I'm just naturally talented at it, and you can't be me. Even like the Hermiones of the world and the Barty Crouch Juniors of the world, who are brilliant, brilliant people. You're not me. And so it's hard sometimes to communicate like, well, why can't you do this? Like, I could do this.
Well, we saw like
easy.
Snape struggled with that. Of he's brilliant with potions and struggled to get people to get on his level. I just feel like Dumbledore has more patience than Snape does, or some like
Snape
in your example, some athletes would.
Snape with his students is one thing. Dumbledore's got a bigger gap there, and Snape is brilliant. Don't get me wrong, but then Snape with his students is one gap. Albus with everybody else, including Snape, is a whole other gap.
See, I would say what adds to that gap is just the fact that he has the Elder Wand. Like, I know he didn't have the Elder Wand his entire life, right? Like.
No, he got it at the duel with Grindelwald in 45.
Right.
So half of his life he didn't have it.
Yeah, half of his life when he's at Hogwarts, like, he doesn't have it. It'd be interesting from his perspective to see how his magic was able to increase when using the wand. But I still feel like, in a whole, he's a teacher by nature, and I feel like he would have done a really good job with, like, Hermione or Percy or whoever he wanted to take under his wing. I'm
not saying he's not a good teacher, because that's what he ultimately did, and obviously the school that he has ran has produced many a fine witch or wizard. I'm not saying he's not a good teacher. I'm just saying it's hard for him to connect with a student and be like, oh, just like do this the same way I can. That's impossible.
I feel like he'd have a better job of breaking it down and demonstrating than like some other people.
The guy that was doing the OWL exams was like, I can't grade you on a scale of best I've ever seen before because I'm sorry, you'll just never hit that bar. He was doing things with Transfiguration that I've never seen done before.
Yeah.
Like, there's just such a gap there.
But to my point, it'd be a bigger gap for him to go, like, him to Hermione is not nearly as big as, like, him to, I don't know, Crabbe. You know? Like, it's less of a gap, so I feel like he would have a better time doing it. We can agree to disagree and move on.
There's so much to Albus Dumbledore, and I know we've talked a lot about Albus Dumbledore throughout this podcast, and this book opens up more layers to really delve into.
Well, even just like the articles themselves, like talking about his father with the attack on the Three Muggles, we know that everything about his sister is why Dumbledore is the way he is. Like, we know that he resented having to watch over her, and he resented having to, like, hide her away, but we had to hide her away because of that, what the Three Muggles did to her. But then, like, seeing how there's the question of whose shot actually killed her, that guilt weighs upon him forever. He saw how the power and how he couldn't handle it makes him know, like, I shouldn't be a minister of magic. Like, having that how did Dodge say it? It's something about, like, he lost his lightheartedness after this experience. He was way more reserved. Like, everything that makes him the character that he is stems from this guilt of his past with his sister. It all makes Dumbledore a fascinating character, though. Speaking of Dumbledore, though, we heard from Rita, apparently, that he is not the only person who ever discovered uses of dragon's blood. Apparently that's some Ivor Dillonsby had 8 uses already, which I've never thought about this before, but I decided to look up what could be the potential 8 uses. And I guess I always just assumed that these were, like, very magical, like, special things with healing powers and potions, and some of that is, but okay, so the backstory. Apparently, J.K. Rowling actually does have a list of these 12 because one of the movie script writers asked her, hey, like, what are the 12? And she was able to respond immediately, but requested that, like, these not be revealed to the public for whatever reason. Although the only one she 100% confirmed, she said the 12th one was that you can use dragon's blood to clean your oven. Fascinating. The other ones...
Well, you know how hard it is to clean your oven. I mean, to scrape off all that, like, grease layer.
So I used dragon blood. So I looked... Harry Potter Wiki only referenced 4, It said like the oven cleaner. It said a spot remover used in the wolfsbane potion, and then it's a cure for Verruca. MuggleNet.com listed out 12. They said perfume, ink, antiviral medicine, a coagulant, could cure your ulcers. It reduces fevers. You can use it as like dye for like clothes and stuff. They said for violins, it could be used as like that polish for them, that resin. It could be incense. It could be for paint, pigments, toothpaste, and various spells. So it seems like there's no actual consensus on what you can use dragon's blood for, other than the things that we have seen in the books, and apparently also oven cleaner.
Well, I think the point is it's a versatile substance that can be used in a lot of different things. Like in the real world, there are inventions that utilize something relatively simple, but that simple thing can be utilized in like 50 things.
Or like they were invented for one purpose, but then they get used in a completely different purpose.
Yeah, they get
like I think about
repurposed.
like the chainsaw, like that was originally invented to help women give birth, and it's like, don't use chainsaws anymore. Like,
yes, one small thing can get repurposed to be like, oh, well, we could do that one thing, and we could also use it for 5 other things. Great. It would make me wonder, like they say 12 uses of dragon's blood, as in like an all-encompassing, well, it's 12 and only 12. I can't imagine it would be only 12, right?
I don't know. It's just, I guess like whenever I read about dragon's blood, I always just thought like some extra magical types of things,
Maybe
not necessarily like toothpaste or dye.
Maybe the next genius that comes through Hogwarts will find another
13th use.
3. Yeah.
Other things, you mentioned Hedwig and how we haven't really heard about her in a while. And this is, again, J.K. Rowling doing what she always does of making sure to reference something before it becomes super, super important.
Hey, remember Hedwig?
Yeah,
Hedwig's
yeah,
here. Remember
yeah.
Hedwig?
Guess who's not going to be here for much longer? Rest in peace. My question is, what do you think his original plan was to do with Hedwig? Just like leave her with the Weasleys or Hagrid or something? Because it's not like he was going to be able to take her on the road.
Okay, so she is an owl that can hunt for herself.
Yeah.
So I think my plan for Hedwig would be just have her uncaged.
But he's mentioned before...
Like the cage would go away.
But they've mentioned before, like, they know Hedwig is associated with Harry, and Hermione made a comment once about how, like, this breed of owls is not really around England as much, so she stands out more.
Yes. Well, so specifically, Hedwig is a snowy owl, so she's Snow White. Mm-hmm. It would be hard for her to do pretty much anything covertly not in the wintertime.
Right.
So, yeah, if she's flying around England in the middle of the summer, she would stand out. And everybody knows...
I would just assume that, like, if she's traveling with the trio...
Well, that's what I'm saying.
That, like, it wouldn't work. Like, I feel like he'd have to leave her with the Weasleys. And that would mostly be the most safe place that you could have her.
I think his intention is to just let her roam freely. I think you just let her go. And if she comes across someone or something that needs to get something to Harry, then I think she would have that intuition, but like, should probably check on Harry, or I should probably do X, Y, or Z, or
she has
I don't know, maybe I
pet
could be
owner.
wrong.
I feel like
maybe she just delivers a mouse in the middle of the night to like Harry he's looking a little scrawny. He needs to eat. Here's a mouse.
You're thinking of cats. I feel like as a pet owner,
her job is to deliver things.
As a pet owner, if I just like released my pet into the wild, knowing that if she's with me, it threatens her life, it'd be too dangerous for her, I would be so worried about my cat out there. So I feel like I'd drop it off with a family that I trust, which would be the Weasleys. I would say maybe Hagrid, but you'd have to go to Hogwarts to do that, and that'd be too big of a risk.
No, you don't. You just send her to Hogwarts. You just send her
with
to
a letter.
Hagrid.
Yeah. But then,
she's a fully capable.
But we know there's going to be people at Hogwarts, like the what are their names? The siblings.
The Caros?
Yeah, like them or Snape would know that this owl is related to Harry, so they could potentially attack her. I feel like the Weasleys would just be the safest place to go. Then they could actually use her, or their owls could have someone to hang out with.
I don't know.
We never hear anything about Pig. What is Ron doing with Pig? He's probably just staying at home too, right?
He's probably, at the Weasleys.
Yeah, so stick Hedwig with Pig, and maybe Pig can grow up a little
Hedwig
bit.
wouldn't want that, as we've seen many a time. No, just let her. She's a fully capable owl of traveling and surviving on her own. She's a predatory bird. She'll be fine. Just let her go do her thing. And then I bet she would have the intuition to come back if needed, or go to where she knows she has safety, which would either be Hagrid or the Weasleys. But...
Yeah, unfortunately we never see it because rest in peace, Hedwig.
Right.
I got two other things. One is the big obvious one. We know the eye in the mirror belongs to Aberforth.
Right.
And we'll be seeing quite a bit of that throughout the series because he's keeping an eye on him, literally.
This is the first time we actually get mention of Aberforth. In a real way. Because he's hinted at the funeral. The barman of the Hogshead is at Albus's funeral. Harry doesn't realize who that barman of Hogshead is until literally the end of this book.
And this is also literally the first time Harry is using the mirror.
Well, he's not using it. He's accidentally...
Well, but it's being used in that
Yeah.
way, right? Like seeing somebody else.
How many times has Sirius checked it and seen like a sign?
Why is it still in the same wrapping paper that I gave it to him in?
This kid, I swear.
The final thing isn't really like a big spoiler or anything, but at the very start of the chapter, Harry mentioned how he stepped on a cold cup of tea left outside his door, which is so British, first of all. I love it. But he says he believes it's a booby trap from Dudley, and we see later that Harry recognizes, oh, maybe this was actually like Dudley's way of trying to express,
Make peace.
yeah, like some emotion.
Peace offering.
And we see that in the next chapter with the Dursleys leaving, how Dudley has been changed by some of his life experiences, and Harry was unable to recognize it because he hasn't spent enough time with him to see that.
Well, as Harry has grown and matured, Dudley, to an extent, has grown and matured. And yes, Harry does not obviously spend time with Dudley because he's off at Hogwarts. And he doesn't want to spend time with Dudley while he's at the house, which is understandable given their history. But yeah, you wonder, and we'll get into this in that Dursley's departing chapter, but it's interesting to kind of think about what's happened in Dudley's life, where he's come to recognize Harry as something that he misses. And he's like, oh,
or
wait.
like cares about, wants to stay safe and stuff.
I think that comes from him missing Harry. I think it's like, oh, wait, why do I miss him? And then he probably has some introspection, because even Dudley, we get a biased view of him through Harry's eyes, of a bullied child. And that's not all that Dudley is either. So I think we had a poll about like Dudley's thoughts and memories that rifle through him as
when he was attacked by the Dementors.
Dementors.
Yeah.
And he was so affected by it. And we were asking, well, why was he so affected by it? Because Dudley seems to be impenetrable and
nothing ever goes wrong in his
pampered.
life. Yeah.
Right. Well, we're getting a view of Dudley, and Harry only had that one view of Dudley. And I think that's when Harry's view of Dudley started to change. He's like, oh,
yeah,
maybe I'm missing something with him.
Yeah.
Maybe there is more ticking underneath than I gave him credit for.
I know J.K. Rowling had the thought of like making Dudley have a magical offspring in the future, and that kind of like faded out of obviously existence or whatever. But I do think it's interesting to think.
Well, he would have potential magical blood. I mean, if he's Petunia's son and Lily was a witch, I mean,
it could have happened.
That blood could be there.
Yeah.
Or as we've thought of way back when, maybe Petunia had an affair with James.
Okay,
And
that's not
then
a we thought that.
that's
That
wh-
was a you ran off on a wild conspiracy,
That's
sir.
why Vernon hates Harry so much, because Harry looks like James. And, maybe that's the whole thing. That was not my theory. That was actually my boss at the time at the clinic that I worked at. No. Well, the Dursleys Departing chapter is an interesting one that we will get to very, very soon.
Yes. Next week.
Yeah. So I think we'll wrap it up here.
Yeah.
And once again, thank you all for listening. And please leave a 5-star review when you're listening to this. Like the posts. Comment. Give us your feedback. Let us know what you're thinking about everything that we are saying.
And share it with your Harry Potter fan friends.
And share it. And we will be back next week with another wonderful chapter in the Deathly Hallows that I'm always excited to talk about. So we will see you then. Thank you for listening.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you for listening to Hogwarts, a podcast. If you like what you've heard, please click the subscribe button on your preferred podcasting app and follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Hogwarts a Pod.